Greetings, fellow citizens. This is Citizenkong. Well, I watched the movie Zeitgeist the Movie on the interweb, and I'll have to admit, right after watching that, I was blown away. I just did not know what to make of it, and I needed a couple days to digest it. Oh, and sure, there was part of me that said, "Oh, I'm gonna research all these facts in the movie. I'm gonna do some fact checking on this." Well, I never got around to it. But some of the things that I saw in the movie, I've heard before, and I'm sure many of you have that have seen the movie, and it is very interesting. A couple years ago, I went and saw a movie called "What the Bleep Do We Know?" and it had all this stuff about quantum physics and the mind and everything. And when I saw that movie, I was blown away. But then I found out that it was connected with some woman that believed in UFOs or something, and that kind of discredited it for me. So we'll see what comes out about the people from behind the Zeitgeist the Movie. It seems to me that the movie is composed of several short films that were sort of thrown together, somehow spliced together as best they could. It starts out dealing with Christianity, and I found that part very interesting. It cited all these parallels, these coincidences with Egyptian mythology and religions from around the world, numbers that have in common the Christ rising from the dead in 3 days, and it just one thing after another. At one point, when it was talking about the Bible, it dismissed Revelations as cartoonish, which Revelations is pretty interesting. I'm disappointed that they did not even touch that, and Revelation seems pertinent later in the film, but I'll get to that. But the argument was set up mainly to dismiss Christianity as that it's all hocus pocus, that it's all based on astrology and other things. Well, it didn't seem to answer that question for me. What intrigued me was how amazing all these coincidences are, and it doesn't address that. Carl Jung talked about the collective unconscious. What he described is there were these similarities in myths all over the world. And Joseph Campbell wrote a book called The Power of Myth. And these belief systems, it's just amazing to me how people scattered all over the world, these things tied together. Or, religion and belief and myth all springs from the same place, the same human experience. So to dismiss it as purely hocus pocus, I think is cutting something out there. And I was hoping that the rest of the movie would tie in with religion a little bit more, as far as kind of showing us the way we are going and why. I mean, if it is all a bunch of phony baloney, it sure drives the world. In art history, or if you're a humanities major or something, I've dabbled in a little bit of that. It all ties together. The notion of being human, belief and non-belief, religions from around the world, the common ground. But I found that part very interesting. Then it moved on to 9/11. And for that, I have come prepared. I'm donning my tinfoil hat, because I smelled conspiracy theory when they started doing the 9/11 stuff. And they had a lot of interesting things. Sure, there's a lot of inexplicable stuff going on with evidence gathering and videotapes being withheld, and and the suspicious behavior of the Bushies. One of the things, though, I've usually said about 9/11 conspiracy theories and it being an inside job, I can't believe that those guys, they're so incompetent that I don't see how they could pull that off. But then again, the film sort of explains that it's all part of the master plan, that Iraq is meant to be a failure. So it's something to think about. I'm going to keep on the foil hat because then it goes on to the banks and the rich guys that pull the strings and the setups for us getting into wars, World War I, World War II, Vietnam. And I'm surprised they didn't mention the Illuminati. And the business about not paying taxes, somebody told me they looked into that, and apparently it's true. I don't know what would happen if we all stopped paying our taxes all at once, and I'm sure some of you out there that would love it. I still kind of believe that under good leadership, our government can be a good thing, that we can do great things. We put a man on the moon. We can also do terrible things, too. But the rich guys and the people that pull the strings, that business with, I've heard this before about George Bush's grandfather having ties with German corporations and the Nazis. And I wish Kerry would have brought that up. That would have been good. Instead of being swift-boated like he was, he could have said, well, your granddad was a Nazi, so there. But they're both skull and bones, so they were probably sworn to keep that stuff a secret. Those skull and bones guys, that's all part of the conspiracy. Yeah. Then they talked about, and people were referencing this on different blogs, this chip. And man, with Bushy setting us up with 9/11 and striking us, putting fear in all of our hearts that we need a national ID. I've heard Chris Matthews say, oh yeah, that's what we need, a national ID system. And it kind of made sense to me, but once they start talking about there being a chip in the card and knows all about you, and then they're going to put the chip and they're going to implant it in you. Now, back to Revelations. I mean, that sounds like Mark of the Beast stuff, doesn't it? And the beginning of the movie, they dismissed that, but implanting a chip in you, and then once you have the mark, you can't buy or sell, you're basically a non-entity? Oy, I have to clamp my conspiracy hat down even tighter. That's frightening stuff. I mean, I've mentioned to you, I was brought up Pentecostal, and boy, that hellfire and brimstone, and growing up, I was fascinated with the end times and Revelations. So that chip stuff, hey, you know what? They're not going to put a chip in me. But they make it sound like, oh, for your safety and security. So I can see a lot of idiotic, stupid, frightened Americans will probably line up for it. And then the movie ties up, Zeitgeist the Movie, ties the ending up with a very nice, positive message at the end, which I liked. And all I can say is, when growing up, FDR said there's nothing to fear. Well, I mean, I wasn't around, but growing up I would hear the quote, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. And I didn't understand what it meant, but it's beginning to make a lot more sense these days. The Bushies want us to be afraid. The powers that be want us to be afraid. And that's no conspiracy. I mean, that's how you manipulate the populace. So let's not be afraid. Don't let fear drive us into doing stupid stuff. I mean, it's okay to worry a little bit. I mean, I'm a chronic worrier. I was worrying since the day I was born. Inherited that from my father. He was a worrier. But don't be afraid. The other thing is, and they touched in the movie about, they quotes from that movie Network. I'm as mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. That's another thing, man. Get some righteous anger. Don't let them push you around. All right. This is Citizenkong signing off. Cheers.